Welcome to NewsReal with Joe and Niall.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Neil. And today's Sunday, 22nd of July, 2018.
Yeah, it is.
Treason Trump, the Treason Summit, Joe. Did you see what happened on the news last week?
I saw treason all over the place.
I
vomited. There was so much treason.
Treason
There's only
everywhere.
so much treason someone can take in like a very short period of time. What the presser was like, if you leave out all of the talking between Putin and Trump, like blah, 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 that wasn't very important or interesting. Kind of diplomacy, whatever. The last few minutes when that AP reporter got up and asked some questions, some hardball questions, and then Trump's response, basically his hardball question was, did you ask Putin, did he hack our election, interfere in our democracy, whatever? And, what did he say? And then Trump's response was just like, that's when I vomited after about 5 seconds of hearing Trump talk, where he completely, I think it was the point, my stomach really turned at the point where he appeared to dismiss the opinion of US intelligence agencies about the meddling in the election in favor of what Putin had said that he didn't. And at that point, I just lost my lunch. Because, who wouldn't? What honest, decent, true-blooded patriot of whatever Western society would not be horrified viscerally at that, at such a I don't know what you call it. It's just a dismissal of the integrity and value and everything that makes Western intelligence agencies great. I mean, I don't know.
This should have just been a non-event because they flew into Helsinki, talked for a couple of hours, had a brief press conference. They flew home, and objectively, U.S.-Russian relations are still the worst in known history. Instead, we get this phenomenal reaction to the fear that those relations might improve. We could have predicted it, but I think the strength of it and the sheer intensity of it, it's taking the batshittery that's going on in Washington over the last 3 years up the curve and with a little extra jump. It's not just gotten worse; it's sort of jumped to a whole other level, I think.
Yes. Do we have any video of that actual important part of Putin and Trump's?
Well, I just want to say a few comments on that.
Yeah.
I would like to play. It was a pretty decent and interesting conversation, both in terms of the prepared notes both presidents had, and then some of the questions were good. They were important questions. Syria, Ukraine, international situations involving energy, trade, wars. Important questions, important issues. The reason these two need to be talking, the prevention of nuclear war, all that stuff. And they both gave some interesting answers. But U.S. journalists, all they could talk about was Russiagate, Russian collusion, Russian meddling, Russian hacking. There's nothing Trump could have said, I think, that would have ever satisfied them. And Trump could have said, in front of Putin, did you, sir, I've just been asked by this AP journalist, did you, sir, meddle in our elections? He could have given him what he asked for. It wouldn't have been enough. There's a subtext. The subtext is, they both got on well, and visibly so. There was no insulting each other. They both played well off each other. Yeah. For example, the very first question from a Russian journalist was a hardball question. It wasn't a softball question because he threw it at Trump and said, "You've been saying Germany shouldn't be getting this gas pipeline." And Trump had to go, "Oh, yeah, well, I think it's not in Germany's best interest." And he even had to say, it's not fair. Russia has an unfair advantage, geography-wise. Well, no
geographical advantage, yeah.
So that's not fair. Now, then the question goes to Putin. Now, he could capitalize on this, right? That's a home run for him. He doesn't. He actually opens up in a cooperative manner. He says, competition, great. Listen, he didn't talk about the pipeline directly. He said, listen, we both have a shared interest in world gas prices and energy prices not plummeting. What if we basically suggest that they rig the market between them? What if we co-manage energy markets? You know what I mean? He found this opening to
Yeah.
And the whole tenor of the conversation was like that. I think that's what they hated. The basic friendliness between the two
cooperation. People. And of course, well, I was going to say about the geography thing where it's the Americans are very, it's not just Trump. I mean, this has been going on before Trump, that the Americans are unhappy about Germany getting its gas. It already has a gas pipeline, Nord Stream 1, from Russia, and now they're building another one, Nord Stream 2, and this will mean that Germany and other countries in Europe will get a lot of gas will get even more gas from Europe and be dependent on them. And it's unfair. That's the way it's presented. It's unfair. And it's unfair because Germany is very close to Russia. It's the closest, Russia is the largest gas producer in the world, and it's quite close to Germany. And that's unfair. And that's in keeping with the US kind of mindset, I suppose, the US political mindset for going back decades, when they found it to be unfair that some Middle Eastern countries, for example, happened to have their countries and their people on top of a bunch of oil. That's just an unfortunate coincidence, and they shouldn't really be there. Certainly oil and gas should not be there. It should be somewhere where America can get easier access to it. But, oh well, we'll just have to invade anyway, and just take it, So it's not strange that he would say that, But yeah.
After the fact, the media reaction focused on that last answer Trump gave. We'll play it now. It's basically the last question before they wrapped up, and it's given to an American journalist, the AP reporter. I forgot his name.
Doofus McButthead.
Something. I don't want to remember his name. He asked the question. It became the question because, we'll see later, Trump backpedaled from his initial response to it.
Okay.
So if we can
roll it there.
Thank you. Question for each president. President Trump, yes. You first. Just now, President Putin denied having anything to do with the election interference in 2016. Every U.S. intelligence agency has concluded that Russia did. My first question for you, sir, is who do you believe? My second question is, would you now, with the whole world watching, tell President Putin, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn him to never do it again?
So let me just say that we have two thoughts. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the server. Haven't they taken the server? Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee? I've been wondering that. I've been asking that for months and months, and I've been tweeting it out and calling it out on social media. Where is the server? I want to know, where is the server, and what is the server saying? With that being said, all I can do is ask the question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be, but I really do want to see the server. But I have confidence in both parties.
Mm-hmm.
So that answer he gave just at the end there, where he said, I have no reason to believe it would be Russia, emphasis on would, is what he then later backpedaled from. We can play that in a minute. But that wrapped it up. But that's not even the highlight. That's not even the best part. It became the thing that they bit into most after the fact. But there were some other gems. I mean, even in his prepared notes, okay, so Trump's just reading from something. But it's either something he wrote or someone else wrote. I mean, is it not like JFK-like? I would rather take a political risk in pursuit of peace than to risk peace in pursuit of politics. I.e. U.S. politics in particular, because that's all this is.
But America risks peace and has risked peace and, in fact, destroyed peace in the interest of politics for the past 70 or 80 years, repeatedly. So, I mean, yeah, he's breaking with tradition. American foreign policy is about risking peace, threatening peace, jeopardizing peace in the interest of politics, which is in the interest of personal, political, and financial gain. So, yeah, I'm not surprised everybody's freaking out about him. But what annoys me about Doofus McButthead there from AP, who asked that question, is he stands up as if it's as if it's a foregone conclusion. This is why...
as if it's a fact, right?
Yeah, as if it's a fact, yeah, that all intelligence agencies, which isn't actually true, there were only...
It got quietly reduced to 4 from 17, right?
Yeah, 4 or 3 even, actually only... And they were only select people from those intelligence agencies who were asked to give their opinion on it. And the intelligence agencies that were asked weren't really the kind of intelligence agencies that should have been dealing with such a question. One of them, among the other 14 or 13 or 14 that didn't say anything on the matter, was the NSA. And the NSA would be the intelligence agency in the US to opine or give evidence on that particular question, because that's what the NSA deal with, right? With signals intelligence, with communications, all that kind of stuff. They're the ones who would know whether or not Russia kind of hacked our election and all these other allegations, or even if there was any collusion between Trump, because it's all about communications, right? But the NSA was not consulted on this at all and did not give an opinion on it. So this guy, that's why I call him Doofus McButthead, because he's actually peddling a lie there for a start. And secondly, the idea that it's a fact, that it's an established fact, is not even true. Not simply because the intelligence agencies in the US have not overwhelmingly, or even a majority of them, given their confirmed this, but it's based on, and people, this is what people forget, it's based on hearsay, innuendo, slander, and spurious allegations. There is nothing else. This is what people forget. People forget that there's nothing else. There is no evidence whatsoever, hard evidence, to back up the claim that Russia did anything to influence the US election, or that Trump was in any way colluding or associating himself with anybody in the Russian government. Yeah. There is no evidence whatsoever, and this is why we kind of lose our shite a little bit, you know, about all of this, and why any sane people out there are doing the same thing if they look at it too long, because this is complete and utter nonsense from the get-go, and obvious nonsense. It's obviously a put-up job. It doesn't, you don't have to be a rocket science, you don't have to be super smart to do it, but for some reason, people's brains have been turned to mush. They simply cannot think about this in an irrational, logical, reasonable way. I mean, the whole server business, that's Trump's talking about the server there. He'd like to see the server. That's a very core question, a core rebuttal to the allegation of hacking, or Russia hacked our election. It's like
the DNC server. The
DNC server
that was emails
that was supposedly hacked, that released information, incriminating information about Hillary Clinton, etc. That is supposedly what the Russians did to damage her reputation. There's no evidence, no hard evidence, that anybody hacked that server. The server was taken away, and it wasn't even given to the FBI. It was given to a group, a tech kind of organization called CrowdStrike, I think, to analyze it, for them to analyze it rather than the FBI. And they're the ones who said, yeah, this was Russia. And this is a company paid by Clinton to basically say, yes, Russia hacked this server. When, as people have said from the very beginning as well, the most likely source of that leak of those emails coming off the DNC servers was someone working within the DNC, working within the Clinton campaign, who really didn't like Clinton. And it maybe surprised a lot of people, but there's a lot of people, for good reason, who don't like Hillary Clinton. And I don't think anybody can disagree with that idea, that there's a lot of people, and probably people who work closely with her, might get pissed off there now and again, and pissed off enough to stick a goddamn USB key into a computer and download a bunch of frickin' emails.
And leak to WikiLeaks.
It was a hack by Russia. Mysterious Russian hackers did it. That's what really happened. Get a effing grip. Jesus Christ. So there's that, and then what else is there? What else is there? Nothing. There's really nothing. Well, there's.
That's the hacking side. Then there's the meddling side that the Russians used. That's the first indictment from a few months ago, that the Russians. If they didn't try to hack that specific info to hurt Clinton and help Trump, then they created this uncertainty and paranoia in the overall country by promoting and funding certain ads that would influence voters in general.
And they produced these ridiculous series of memes from Facebook and Twitter that didn't influence anybody, and obviously were the product of internal US politics. Conservatives were creating these kind of memes of Jesus and the devil, and saying, which one do you want to win? I.e., Jesus is Trump and the devil is Clinton. That kind of stuff. I mean, the fact that stuff even flies or that anybody takes that serious, it just boggles my mind. It's amazing. And also, but the DNC hack thing was pretty much not long after Trump became president last year. That came out. And of course, there's the allegation that Seth Rich was the guy who was murdered and in Washington.
No one knows how, by who.
Washington D.C. on the street in Washington D.C. one night, and he gets shot, and nobody takes his wallet
twice in the back.
Or no wallet, no theft at all, and he was a DNC kind of insider. Could have been him. So some emails get stolen from the DNC server, and then one of the guys who worked within the DNC is shot on the street, and nobody steals his stuff. I mean, obviously, it's a far more plausible explanation for how it happened than this nonsense Russian hacking. But then, obviously, in January, right even before Trump was inaugurated, you had this made-up bullshit dodgy dossier, concocted paid for by Clinton again, and produced by a former/current British intelligence MI5 operative, Christopher Steele, who was paid a lot of money, $160,000, I think, just to produce this crappy dossier full of salacious, stupid, ridiculous, nonsensical allegations. And he paid Russians to do it. So he paid money from Hillary Clinton, paid Clinton's money basically to Russians for them to make up stuff, and he then made up some other stuff and threw it into a dossier. And this becomes the indictment that Putin and Trump have contacts. That's it. There's not much else. I mean, in terms of the actual originating evidence that actually started this whole thing going, that people now, after a year and a half of being repeatedly propagandized with this dodgy evidence as if it's fact, then people suddenly know now for sure that it's a fact, which leads this idiot AP journalist to stand up at that summit and ask this question as if it's like complete, ironclad, hard and fast, no question whatsoever. What's happening?
I thought Trump did really well in his prepared remarks and then in handling the press conference. If one criticism is that he didn't do something like this, where he just punches out the basic facts. And we discussed it earlier in the week, and it bothered you as well that everyone knows this. There's something about Trump's elocution where he begins something, and midway through a sentence, he stops and he starts another sentence. He doesn't even finish that one, but in a roundabout way, he makes the point so that you get the gist, but he doesn't nail it. I think it's part because he, as an American, he's a product of the same system that's turning people's brains to mush. So maybe it's partly the way he is personally. It's partly the result of people's brains being turned to mush. But I also suspect there's an element of him having to dance on his feet. He's so used to it at home that even abroad in this setting, he knows this is going to be hot news back home. So in response to that AP journalist, why didn't he just hit him with, he did his classic deflection where he goes, where's the server? Where's the server? It's a good answer, but he didn't really slam it.
He could have done.
In contrast, Putin seemed to relish it. You see, Trump's standing there and he's not handling diplomacy between the United States and Russia. It's not that simple on his side. On the Russian side, it is. Putin is clearly the president of Russia. He has their support. He can speak freely. Trump is hamstrung because he's the mediator between the deep state and the American people and Putin. So he's handling the three things or forces at once, Putin's answers, in contrast, were just dynamite. That's what I mean. He seemed to relish it because he goes, well, okay, if that, what about this? And he did this two awesome name droppings. If we're talking about meddling in foreign elections, then I'd like to listen to what I have to say about, and he named them, Bill Browder. And he also name dropped that Bill Browder, with the money that he stole from the Russian state when he fled the country in 2013, 2012, it was a mistranslation. The translator said it was 400 million of that went to Clinton. It was only 400,000, but still, he said, donation. Putin said, while the contribution to the DNC may have been legal, or not to the DNC, specifically to Clinton's campaign, how they got that money was illegal.
What would be really interesting would be if, obviously you can't trace the money that exactly, but it would be interesting if that...
Maybe he can.
Well,
Maybe
no,
he
but I
knows.
mean, exactly in the way that I'm thinking about it, it would be really, it would be very rich, or ironic, I suppose, in a certain sense, that if that 400,000 that Bill Browder gave of what is effectively Russian state money, Russian tax money,
Taxes
basically,
owed to the Russian
that he
state.
stole $250, $300 million. He gave 400,000 over to the Clinton campaign, and then Clinton gave that money to Christopher Steele, who then gave it back to some Russians to produce this lie
Very possible.
about Trump. And so Trump's enemy then is ultimately, the money man behind it. In that situation, the money man behind it would be Bill Browder,
Yeah.
So, yeah, Trump would have every reason, if he thought about it in that way, to hand Bill Browder over to the Russians to face justice, the slimy snake that he is. But on the way that the two of them dealt with it, both of them, the impression I get from both of them, Trump isn't quite so good at it because it's more personal to him, and he can't help but kind of like throw back some comments like about the server, where's the server and stuff. But Putin just talks above it all, and is kind of dismissive of it. He just is. Yeah, I mean, his response to the response he's given previous to similar kinds of questions from U.S. journalists and to this guy about did you hack our elections? It's just he's just dismissive. Which is, if you think about it, the most appropriate way to respond to a stupid, ridiculous question. You just go, you highlight its ridiculousness by just going, listen.
But he stuck to the facts as well. Like, for example, the U.S. journalists thought they would nail him by citing both indictments. And Putin went, well, obviously, the new one about the 12 Russian agents specifically named as being the hackers, it happened 2 days before. I can't answer to that right now. We're willing to investigate. Mm-hmm. And that's where he goes, if you help us get a hold of Bill Browder, who is wanted in Russia under Interpol notice. Interpol won't give him to Russia because for the first time ever, they've decided that it's political persecution and they won't uphold their own red notice.
Well, not the first time ever.
There are other cases, okay. But
Interpol
repeatedly they won't. Anyway, so that's Bill Browder, but he drops that. But then he answers, he doesn't just deflect away with some other spiel. He answers the question directly and says, right, let's talk about the indictments. The first one has appeared in a U.S. court. It's been forgotten, but that happened in March or so. Mm-hmm. And the company's name, the Russian company, Putin's cook, his chef, he owns a catering company, had his lawyers go to court. Putin explained this, and it was either thrown out or it's basic. No.
Mueller crapped his pants because he wasn't expecting anybody. Mueller hands out these indictments against Russians and expects them that be evidence. But of course, indictments aren't evidence. I mean, and there's a famous saying that in the U.S., prosecutors will indict a ham sandwich, which they may have done at some point in the past, or some kind of sandwich to give testimony. But the ham sandwich never turns up, obviously, and doesn't say anything even if it does. So indictments like Mueller's, like the indictments that Mueller are handing out, are simply there's kind of slurs, or it's defamation, it's innuendo, because and you indict people that will never appear in court. But then the indictment seems to have a validity or legitimacy of its own when it really doesn't. It's the fact that you have said, I want these people to come to this court to answer these charges because we think that they are in some way implicated in this crime. And the person will never arrive. So that's the only thing that's left standing is your indictment. It's not evidence. It's basically worthless, but it has a lot of influence or can create a narrative in the public mind, and that's why he's handing out these indictments. So when he handed out a couple of indictments earlier this year, he expected that the two people that he indicted, two Russians accused of, spreading these memes on Facebook and stuff, wouldn't turn up, and they actually did turn up. At least they were represented by their lawyer, and immediately Mueller tried to have the case delayed till he could clean his pants, basically, to get a new pair of underpants, which was going to take quite some time. So but the judge denied that delay, and the course continued, and the case continued, and I think it was just recently, actually, they were up in front of the judge again, and these two Russians' lawyers demanded, okay, since we've been accused of these things, we want
see the evidence,
disclosure of everything, which again caused a loud noise to issue from Mueller's office, and a lot of flushing went on. So they're in trouble basically in that respect. They're scrambling to try and kind of like make this go away. And then Mueller indicts 12 more. I mean, he was more careful about his more recent indictment of 12 Russians. He picked 12 people who he said work for the GRU, Russian Intelligence Service. There are names, but there's no way to know if those are actually people, if they exist, or if he pulled them out of his backside, which he may well have done. So he was more safe on this one because there's no way that those guys are ever going to get representation, if they even exist. Those guys, maybe they don't exist, and that's why that's one way to make sure that the people you indict will never appear in court if you just make up their names. If they're fictional people, obviously they're never going to appear in court, and they're not going to hire lawyers to come to court because they don't exist.
Or if they do, it's well understood by convention, if nothing else. There might even be actual laws about this in international law. If you're going to name 12 diplomats / foreign intelligence officers of another country, that's going to take a big okay from the state in question. And as Putin answered it.
Well, in the press conference, then Putin addressed that by saying that he offered to for the for Mueller's team basically to send over the questions and
the investigators themselves in person.
Yeah, and that they could question them.
Right.
And in Russia, and what more do you want? But the Americans apparently, the Congress and stuff, just aren't happy with that for some reason because I think the idea from the anti-Trump contingent in the media and in Congress, etc., in the deep state is that no, look, we're just meant to make these allegations against you and claim it as fact, and then you're meant to just leave it at that. You Russians don't seem to understand the process here. Like, we make the allegations, and then our media says it's a fact, peddles it as fact to the people, and then that's where it ends. You don't go through a court case and find out whether or not what we're saying is actually true. That's not the point. Have you not realized what the point of this is yet? It's for us to spread rumor, innuendo, and slander and defamation, and for you just to suck it up.
Exactly. It's like people telling Putin, whispering in his ear, as he's explained a number of times, whenever the US increases sanctions or the rhetoric against Russia, especially during the Obama administration, Putin says that he would have someone, whisper and say, hey, listen, we're not serious about that. Listen, it's just, it's internal politics.
Yeah.
Now, they won't disclose that anymore, but it's obvious to everyone that it is internal politics. Putin can see that himself. This is your issue. Stop bringing us into it.
Mm. The other thing Mueller's doing actually is the people that he's indicting or that he's bringing up charges against, he's actually passing them off to the Department of Justice, rather than actually. There's other people. There's like he's been investigating a close Trump associate, Michael Cohen, who I think
his former lawyer.
Yes. Let me see what Cohen. Yeah, he's a key. Cohen's. I'm just reading here. He's a key figure in theories of Trump-Russia collusion. Basically, Cohen was accused in the dodgy dossier. Cohen was accused of holding secret talks with Russian officials in August 2016 to discuss how deniable cash payments were to be made to hackers who had worked in Europe under Kremlin direction against the Clinton campaign. Blah blah blah. So this guy has been accused in the dossier. He's mentioned in the Steele dodgy dossier. So Trump or Mueller has kind of ID'd him and is investigating him. But now that he's built up some kind of list of crimes that this guy is possibly guilty of, he's passed it off to the DOJ. And when you pass it off to the DOJ, it kind of goes into a secret room and it's hidden, whereas Mueller's investigation is meant to be very public. Like with Manafort, it was all very public what was going on. So Mueller is basically flagging all these people to kind of build up the case, but then not actually prosecuting them himself publicly, giving them over to the DOJ so they basically disappear. He's done the same thing with this woman more recently, Butina.
Yes.
The woman who, just another woman who's basically working, obviously has been over the years lots of lobbying going on by Russians in America and by Americans in Russia and every other country around the world. And this woman, Butina, works for Her kind of patron is a guy who worked for a Russian bank and was a member of Putin's party and stuff like that.
Torsion,
Alexander Torsion, and he's been in the US. Both of them are basically gun nuts, and they have an organization in Russia called the Right to Bear Arms, and they're basically gun promoters. And so they many years ago established links with the NRA and went to NRA conferences and hooked up with NRA people and stuff. And that's about the height of it, basically. That's all there is. But Mueller is trying to make something out of that she's this kind of super secret Russian spy, the Red Sparrow or something. And
she's already convicted in trial by media.
Yeah, but she actually,
of course, they're calling her a spy.
Yeah, of course, it's done and dusted. But she's a nobody, basically. There's nothing to see there at all. But
she's a lobbyist who happens to be Russian.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much the height of it. If you wanted a simple version of it, it's that she's a Russian lobbyist working on behalf of a group like a Russian organization. In very, I mean, the only thing is she's not an official lobbyist. So the only thing they can really accuse her of, if they can say that she was involved in some kind of work for the Russian government, which they're trying to do, then they would accuse her of not registering as a foreign agent, which she didn't.
Right.
But she wasn't working for the Russian government. She was working for this organization in Russia called the Right to Bear Arms. And she wanted to hook up with the Republicans and with the NRA. NRA and Republicans are like, two peas in a pod, basically. So she had contacts there. She had gone to meets and stuff like that.
Well, she went to a Trump rally when he was campaigning.
Well, of course.
They have video. They're playing video now of her asking him a question.
Right, but he was going to be...
This is evidence of Russian collusion.
But he was going to be the next next Republican president. So, of course, she was going to be interested in talking to him. They all are. I mean, people don't know what the lobbying situation is like in the US. It's freaking like it's like a cat fight, you know what I mean? It's a cesspool.
So this is obviously cooked up. I mean, 2 days before the summit, there's a second.
So the other thing about her is she's gone to the DOJ as well. Mueller's not investigating her anymore. He's just basically ID'd her as a Russian spy. Once that's done in the media, we found a Russian spy. Mm-hmm. Then her case actually gets shoved off to actually find out whether the allegation that she's a Russian spy and has been working, for Putin to try and contact Trump and destroy our democracy. Those allegations are made. Then Mueller doesn't actually follow it up. He doesn't have to prove anything. He doesn't have to collect any evidence. He doesn't have to have any evidence because he pushed it off to the DOJ. The DOJ kind of just put it into a dark room somewhere and it disappears. And the whole point of this is to create media truths, quote unquote media truths, by issuing indictments, by talking about individual Russians, and then not following up at all. Making the allegations that are, when you look into them, are baseless, but have the media present them as fully, well-founded allegations, and then make the case disappear. Don't follow it up. Don't investigate. No evidence. No court case. Nothing. Done. But it's trial by jury. Trial by media. Judge, jury, and executioner is the media, and it's done. And it's in people's heads, and that is the job done. End of story. This is not
Russian spies are running around the US.
Just get it out there,
hacking our brains.
Right. So, yes.
I think just the act of Trump doing this meeting was an act of rebellion. He could have stood there and said gobbledygook, and or he could have said there. Likewise, he could have stood there and given them exactly what they wanted to hear.
Yeah.
But Anderson Cooper and all the others who were there, ready in their makeshift studios in Helsinki for when it ended, would still have turned to the cameras and said, "This was the most disgraceful performance ever." Well,
there's a tweet from a New York Times journalist. I think we have it up on the screen there. Yeah, that's it right there. This is from, what's his name? Michael Gershon. Some another doofus McButthead. He tweets this about the Helsinki, about the meeting between Putin and Trump. And so our president, who shows how tough he is by abusing migrant children, was a cringing coward before a dictator. There's so many. I mean, all of the words in that sentence are wrong, including the small words like "and." All of them are wrong. It's not just that the main points are wrong. All of them are wrong. Every single word, including the period at the end, is wrong.
Do you know why it's in quote marks?
Because he quoted himself. He's quoting himself from the New York Times, from that article. The article underneath is called...
I don't think so, because I heard someone say that in a rally this week. Bernie Sanders said that to a crowd, a baying crowd who went and they cheered and they hooped and they hollered.
Okay, well maybe he's quoting himself, quoting someone else in his article, basically. But let me just duck out of view here. It's Scotty, what's the title in that article underneath that it's quote from? Under Trump's face. That one right there under the tweet. Trump.
The title.
Yeah, opinion. Trump replaces
national pride with personal vanity.
Personal vanity. So that's this guy's New York Times columnist. And this is a New York Times, obviously, it's Jeff Bezos. Amazon man. He owns the New York Times.
Isn't he WAPO and NYT is someone else?
I think he's New York Times as well, no?
Not sure.
Maybe, I don't know. I thought he was New York Times as well. But anyway, this guy is obviously an idiot. Because, I mean, that kind of a headline is just, quoting that in an article is just ridiculous. How tough, abusing migrant children and a cringing coward before the It's not even true on any level whatsoever. It didn't actually happen, but he puts that out there. And then we have other people like picking up on that, you know.
Yeah.
I saw that tweet actually, not from, because I don't follow that guy. I don't follow idiots like him, although I probably should. Just to see what idiocy they come up with. But I saw Jonathan Haidt, who's...
No.
Yes.
What did he do?
Jonathan Haidt is...
well, we like Jonathan Haidt.
We like Jonathan Haidt. He's a professor of psychology or whatever. And he's written a book...
The Righteous Mind.
The Righteous Mind. And we like that book. It goes into...
He figured out what's wrong with liberals.
He goes into what the differences are between basically left and right type minded people in politics and stuff, and why they fight and why they hate each other and stuff, and he brings it down to a very basic level in terms of almost like a nature. Basically, it's in people's natures to be left or right. But anyway, the problem is that he retweeted that, and I saw another tweet around the same time from Jonathan Haidt, who is a guy who should know better, but it just goes to show that people who can have really great minds and can really dig into a topic and uncover truths about human nature and stuff are still subject to this kind of propaganda, to lose their marbles, basically. Because he also tweeted something, he said, at certain times the president, this is another tweet around the same time, at certain times the president is supposed to be the high priest of the American civil religion. After Charlottesville, he says, I wrote an essay on how the president had committed sacrilege. He just did it again in Helsinki. This is Jonathan Haidt basically saying that the president is meant to be the high priest of American civil religion. Like he's meant to be above it all and he's meant to keep everybody together. And he committed sacrilege against his kind of sacred duty, let's say, to keep people together by his comments after Charlottesville. And he said he just did it again in Helsinki. And what was he referring to about Helsinki? The only thing he could be referring to about Helsinki and Trump and Putin's meeting is that what everybody else, all of the rest of the media have been complaining about, which is that Trump dissed our intelligence agencies. And that is what this guy Haidt is saying is sacrilege. So it's basically sacrilege, which is a pretty strong word, for the president not to have the back always of US intelligence agencies and not to recognize that everything they say is always true. How a supposedly educated...
We have his page up. Can you scroll down, Scotty, to find some of these tweets? I think it's from July 16th it begins.
Wow, you're going to probably have to go down a while.
It's sacrilege. I know the article you're referring to. So here it is here.
At certain times, there you go. At certain times, the president is supposed to be the high priest of the American civil religion. At Charlottesville, he wrote an essay on how the president had committed sacrilege, and he just did it again in Helsinki. So, yeah, I mean, the only thing that he can be accusing Trump of doing in Helsinki is the only thing he can be referring to with the reference to sacrilege is his sacrilege against the U.S. intelligence agencies by taking Putin's word over their word. And the truth be damned, supposedly, because how someone like him, surely he must be aware of the dodgy, murky history of U.S. intelligence agencies vis-a-vis the truth about certain things. I mean, it's not that long ago that they were peddling unmitigated bullshit to the entire world about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. So they have passed form on this. So why would you put undying, unconditional faith in an intel agency or a group of intelligence agencies who are on record as having told very, very big and damaging and destructive lies in the past. Why would you dismiss that? Because I'm assuming he's aware of it. Why would you dismiss that and say it doesn't matter when the chips are down? You still have to respect and give credence to people who have a history of lying. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Just before he tweeted that, he retweeted James Comey.
Right.
When he says patriots need to stand up and reject the behavior of this president. And that
he's getting sucked into partisan politics, into left-right,
big time.
Left-right.
And that Comey thing has 236,000 likes. I mean, who are these people? Like,
here's the thing: everybody who is hating Trump is on the left, right? Pretty much, they're all lefties of some stripe, right? The majority of them, they're left, either officially lefties, Democratic Party members, whatever, but they're or otherwise left taste buddy kind of people, in terms of heights. Moral taste buds. So my question is that how people who self-identify as on the left, how in 2018 those people can be the biggest cheerleaders for the FBI, the CIA, John McCain,
the NSA,
Jeff Bezos. How can they be the resistance if they're supporting those people? I mean, this is the left. This is the traditional anti-war left, right?
Yeah.
Anti-corruption, anti-elite, anti-big government, corrupt, powerful government, corrupt business, corrupt corporations, greedy corporations. And yet that contingent, with their long history of being anti-war and anti-corruption and anti-big business, are now the biggest supporters of the FBI, the CIA, Jeff Bezos, who is now the richest man in the world, and people like John McCain. They're supporting John McCain. The left is supporting John McCain. Does that not just like slap you in the face like a big fish or something? I mean, how did that happen? How is that possible?
I think
because they've been twisted. But
there's it's something subconscious happening here. It's probably best explained by Lobachevsky in the polarization, how people's minds can be taken over and influenced. I mean, the phrase he used was the subconscious selection and substitution of data. So lefties, traditional anti-war lefties, they know these same people or their predecessors killed JFK. They know they killed MLK. They know they killed RFK. They know Vietnam War was their fault. They know, as we come forward in time, they know that they're initially behind the Mujahideen, which led to Al-Qaeda. They know they were behind Iran-Contra. They know they were behind
overthrowing dictators in Guatemala,
left,
and
right,
Iran,
and
in El Salvador, in Indonesia, in dozens of other places.
They know all these facts, but but
because Trump,
when it's presented to them in this way, who do you believe? The president of Russian Federation, the evil one, or our patriotic intelligence community?
No,
where the
it's worse than
lives,
that. The problem is all this litany of crimes that they know about, committed by U.S. intelligence agencies over the years, that they've been at protests for, that they've been denouncing for decades, all now just disappear because they're confronted with a big unpresidential orange-faced buffoon. And he is dissing the intelligence agencies that they've hated for so long. But because they hate him more, they're going to love up the intelligence. I mean, talk about a lack of integrity, a lack of conscience, a lack of just basic intelligence. I mean, there's something seriously wrong with those people. I mean, because I'm not exaggerating when I say the people who are the most anti-Trump and who are now finding themselves in a position of supporting the CIA. They're the ones who have been up until Trump the biggest opponents of these people that they're now supporting.
Yeah.
So what kind of credibility do those people have when you see them basically just turn around and say that black is now white when before they were saying white is black? I mean, or when they're basically completely changed their tune. Absolutely, they've basically completely turned ideologically, let's say, and politically, in every
turned collaborators.
Yeah, I mean,
they betrayed everything they claim to represent. What I wonder is, I mean, in an offhand way, it's almost as if there's a godlike status for the so-called intelligence community, which is the deep state. And by the way, in this standoff where Trump is a traitor and do you not believe our patriots, are they not between the lines saying, yes, you're all right. There is, in fact, a deep state. And yes, it does, in fact, wield real power. And yes, in fact, the president of the United States of America is just a puppet. So will someone please put a cap on Trump? Because the president is not supposed to be doing what he's doing. Right. They're tacitly saying this is the case. This is how it was always so. And isn't it funny that Trump, having the office, the title, the symbology of the office, isn't enough to defend him from it. Far from it. He's lesser than these gods who, intercede like on behalf of the American people with God so that even when they do wrong, there can never be wrong.
Right. Yeah.
There's something really weird going on here, but it's all connected. This is the reason why these people, we assume, in at least some of the cases, can get away with pulling off things like the Vegas massacre. Mm-hmm. I mean, by get away with, people will have doubts. A lot of people maybe don't believe the official story, but they get away with it. There should be, in a normal situation, there should be a freaking insurrection. Find out who did it, where they live, and kill them, frankly. Yep. But instead, it's eventually put under the, all right, we'll eat that one too. But if you keep doing that, and they keep being able to do even more excesses, it has an effect on people's brains where
they've sold their souls, basically.
There is a master, we accept, we submit.
Yeah. And that's what they're pushing for, yeah.
It's playing out on the world stage right now in this drama.
Right. And they don't care about facts, obviously. The last thing they care about is actual facts and details. They're on an ideological I don't know, I suppose it's not to use a Trump word, but it's a witch hunt. It is obviously a witch hunt, and they're committed to it, and they've doubled down and they'll keep doubling down. And actually, facts that refute their argument only make them. It doesn't make them stop and think, oh yeah, maybe I'm wrong. They actually double down and scream all the louder. I mean, this guy Strzok, the scary guy from the FBI who basically spearheaded the investigation into Trump and
so-called collusion.
Give Clinton a free pass and stuff. Most people have probably seen some of his testimony. He's a scary looking freak, basically. But in the investigation of him and his notorious text messages between him and his girlfriend, his mistress, Paige, her name is. There's one, and there's thousands of text messages between them that supposedly Congress have been looking at to find on this parallel investigation into whether or not this whole Russia collusion business is complete nonsense, which it obviously is. There's one text message that was sent on by Strzok to Paige on May 19th, 2017, so well into the whole dodgy dossier and collusion stuff and hacked our elections. May 19th last year, the text message that he sent to her when she asked him about, what was going on with the Russian collusion stuff and whether is there anything we can go on, basically, is there anything we'll work with? His response to her was, and it's an official text message from him that he doesn't deny sending. He said, "There's no big there." This is the guy who's front and center of the investigation into leading, effectively, doing the groundwork on the investigation into Trump's collusion and Russia hacking our elections. And he said there's no big there. And he was asked about that email and he refused in that hearing he had, and he refused to say anything about it. But then in a closed door session with his mistress, Paige, she basically spilled the beans. And she, according to sources that interviewed her, basically confirmed that the message in fact referred to the quality of the Russia case, according to multiple eyewitnesses, basically, who were there, who saw her, that she basically said, yeah, because he was trying to say, well, there's no big there. What does that mean? I don't know what it means. I can't remember what I meant by that, blah, blah. She said, no, what he meant, it was in response to a question I asked him that basically said, there's nothing to this Russia collusion business. He said that in May. This is the guy, this is the guy who is like, without whom a lot of it wouldn't have much traction. They'd have to make him up, basically. And
he's the lead investigator for Mueller.
Right, he's the lead investigator. And he's the one who said, in reference to the Russia collusion investigation, that there's really not much there.
So CNN
and yet here we are. And yet Doofus McDoofus stands up in front of, a year later, stands up in front of Putin and Trump at Helsinki and demands to know whether Trump is going to accept the hard, cold fact of Russia collusion and Russian meddling in our elections. And yet the lead investigator said, meh.
There is none.
So,
I
what?
know.
Anybody? Anybody? Why are we doing this? Why is this even happening? Nobody knows.
The lie is almost, it's saturating everything, but it's also free floating, you know, there to take with at any time you want and there to articulate.
You know
but
what?
it has no roots, it has no real meaning, it has no basis, it has no factual basis in this world.
They've lost their mind. They've lost their marbles. And unfortunately, when people have lost their mind, when have gone technically, kind of officially, or clinically, let's say, insane, but, you know, they still are able to maintain normal lives and stuff, but they've actually gone a version of insane, a new variety of insane. There's no way you can reach them, is the problem.
No.
Because they're insane, is the point. They're technically insane, and they have bought into a lie so much that their brains have basically just turned to mush. They cannot see reality, at least in this on this topic, and just do not even try to.
There'll be very few of them
any...
that can be pulled back from it. It's conversive thinking, and Lobachevsky wrote about it. He warned that when you get into that state, you'll be lucky if their offspring, the next generation, are not infected to the extent that they won't grow up with it. But that's touch and go as well. It might take generations for this to really flush itself out.
What annoys me as well is that even the Republicans and stuff there's none of them are willing to go to the to state the obvious, which is that all of it is a lie. Most of them are all saying yes, or feel that they have to say yes, Russia meddled in our election, and they'll cite things that yes, Russia's a bad actor on the world stage, and they'll cite things like Putin's responsibility for the shooting down of MH17, and Putin's responsibility for annexing Crimea and starting a war in Crimea.
But didn't
Putin's
Hillary also take money from Russians for uranium? Yes, but okay, the crime is real, but she did it too.
Yeah, but that's a lie, is the thing.
That's a lie. It's still a lie.
Republicans are peddling lies as well, which is that there's no evidence that that Russia meddled, like we said. There is no evidence. There's no evidence that Russia had anything to do with the shooting down of MH17. And Russia did not annex Crimea. Crimea voted. The Crimean people, ethnic Russians, the vast majority of them, voted to rejoin the Russian Federation, which is the right of self-determination of all peoples enshrined in the UN Charter. So,
A final word on height. Let this be a warning about intellectuals, especially ones with a lot of traction. They may do a lot of good work. They may be able to apply it correctly in some areas, but they too are, of course, completely wide open to the same mind virus that's eating the opponents, say in the liberal intelligentsia. To paraphrase Haidt himself, ideology binds and blinds. Cuts both ways. He himself is steeped in the same ideology he's claiming to be distancing himself from. It's in a weird form where it's postmodernism and it's radical leftism. He can easily see through that, but he is unable to see the ideology that blinds himself.
Because you can define it doesn't mean that you're immune to it. You
Absolutely.
have to take other steps.
The basic ideological premise at stake here is that the U.S. is exceptional. This is a truism for Americans, for most Americans. If the U.S. is exceptional, it's up here, it's elevated, it carries the torch of freedom and civilization, yada, yada. Therefore, Russia is down here, evil, if you like. Thus, when Trump is coddling the Russian president in the press conference, Trump is committing treason. That's the best rationale I can figure out. If you were to logically follow the thought process, if you could magically do a brain scan on how someone as smart as Haidt arrives at that conclusion. But that's a guess because it's all taking place subconsciously.
Right.
And they cannot themselves articulate it. I mean, what Haidt did was he referenced an article which was a decent breakdown of the Charlottesville issue last year, and he said that the sacrilege that Trump had committed in that case, which is arguably in the ballpark, when he failed to condemn straight off the bat the KKK, David Duke, yada yada, because in Trump's mind he didn't want to be bashing anyone who was drawn to the basic message of the Unite the Right rally anyway. So Haidt said he's committing sacrilege because there's a basic agreement, a shared agreement common to all Americans, that really extremist stuff is not us. And therefore he had a point. But then he just, in his mind, when this is an equivalent thing because the American president's talking to the Russian one. He's committing sacrilege.
Yeah, against American exceptionalism and the American dream and everything that America stands for. I mean, unfortunately, if you live in America, for the most part, or for the most part of people in America, you have been programmed from birth with a really nefarious, I suppose you call it, ideology and vision and view of the world and view of yourself, which is it's kind of coming home to roost now. That's really been exploited now, and you see that almost nobody is immune to it. You know, Americans are held; they're kind of trapped. There's been a cage made or a prison made for their minds from the very beginning. You know, of people's lives, and it's very difficult. There are very few people who can step outside it, and other people in the rest of the world are able to see that more clearly because they're not in that prison. But people really need to first of all recognize if you're in prison. First of all, you have to recognize that you're in prison, that there's a prison for your mind, basically, that has been made, to quote the Matrix, and that's what they're suffering from right now, you know, and it's pretty horrible to watch.
What I really like about the hysterical reaction to the summit is that it has brought, by the questions those reporters asked, and then by the reaction afterwards, treason, it has brought the situation to at least a clarifying point. This is Trump's "you're with us or you're against the" moment, to quote George Bush shortly after 9/11. And the clarification is, it's obviously too simplistic, but he's saying you either believe the Russian president or you believe our intelligence community patriots. And what I mean is that being a positive thing is that it has brought back to the fore that this was a war of the deep state against Trump. And that now in the national discussion, I suspect they're going to try and recloak it, or they'll keep up the pressure on Trump, but they'll try and get it back away from that. If you remember what happened when Trump was elected, while he was president-elect, there was a clash brewing and it was in the papers. Trump was refusing or dismissive of going to intelligence briefings as the incoming president. And he said something to the effect of, they don't have anything useful to tell me anyway. I just go on Twitter and have a good idea of what's going on. Like the rest of us, he gets his daily brief just watching the news, you know, and working it out himself. And then that provoked this backlash, you know.
Yeah.
And then I thought at the time that he switched tack, because right from the get-go, when he had his first press conference, now as president inaugurated, he had that famous moment where he wouldn't take a question from Acosta, the CNN guy in the crowd, and he goes, "You are fake news." And then it became Trump versus fake news. What we see now is that fake news was a euphemism for that same intelligence community.
Right.
I mean, it's self-evident to us.
The
we
media
see the
and
symbiosis between the two,
yeah.
but it was taken the battle was taken over here a little rather than head on between the deep staters and Trump. And now it's back to a head on battle. But because of that, it's dangerous. Hello, JFK gets shot in the head. So what happens when Trump isn't home 12 hours when he backpedals?
Yeah.
I want to play that. It's the very brief clip. Trump is back he's back in the White House. No, yeah, he's in the White House. I think he's taking questions. And we have this clip where he clarifies something that he meant to say in the press conference with Putin. But did he really? Okay, let's have a listen.
Let me begin by saying that, once again, the full faith and support for America's intelligence agencies. I have a full faith in our intelligence agencies. Whoops, they just turned off the light. That must be the intelligence agencies. There it goes. Okay. You guys okay? Good. That was strange, but that's okay. So I'll begin by stating that I have full faith and support for America's great intelligence agencies. Always have to say, I came back and I said, what is going on? What's the big deal? So I got a transcript, I reviewed it. I actually went out and reviewed a clip of an answer that I gave. And I realized that there is a need for some clarification. It should have been obvious. I thought it would be obvious, but I would like to clarify just in case it wasn't. In a key sentence in my remarks, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, or why it wouldn't be Russia. So, just to repeat it, I said the word would instead of wouldn't, and the sentence should have been, and I thought it would be maybe a little bit unclear on the transcript or unclear on the actual video. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia. Sort of a double negative.
So that's an obvious climb down.
Right.
And now we can look at it like we used to. Oh, God, he's sold out of the deep state. Well, it's not just he's sold out of the deep state. Can you try and put yourself in his shoes? The freaking pressure, Calderon, of going back into the United States with this going on. So, yeah, he backed down. And you'll notice that he backed down. And there was some weird moment where the power went out. Maybe there was a storm in D.C. or something. And the lights flickered just as he was about to say this.
Just as he was saying, I have complete faith in our intelligence agency.
In the intelligence agency. And his arms are crossed and he's looking her down. Oh.
It's
getting spooky, literally.
Yeah. But, I mean, the interesting thing is that he backed down. But then, I think the next day, he announced that Putin was coming to the White House.
Right.
Which is like, so that seems to be what he does. He kind of plays. He's dancing around and plays, you know, gives a little bit, but then he tries to carry on his with his plan, whatever it is, you know. And his plan seems to be, at least on the Russia front, international relations, is to have better relations with Russia, and that's what he's pushing forward with, obviously, by having Putin come to the White House. Whether or not Putin will come is a different story, but on the media and him, so that's an interesting point you mentioned about how the Trump, when he talks about fake news, he's really also indirectly talking about the intel agencies, because he may well be aware that, I mean, he is aware because he's talked about leaks coming from the FBI to the media and stuff. So the FBI is an intelligence agency, and they're obviously complicit in leaking information that's damaging to Trump, etc., leaking bullshit and lies, passing out official documents or inside sources tell me this to the media that are damaging to Trump and push the deep state agenda. But and that's not no surprise, and shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, it's been in Western media, in the Western press over the years. I mean, you're not allowed to say it so much anymore, but back 20, 30 years ago, there was lots of articles about in the Western mainstream media about how intel agencies in Europe and in the US were very much hand in glove with the media. You know, there's an article from the Guardian from 1981, December 1981. The title of it was "How the Secret Service Shaped the News." As a journalist, Richard Fletcher at the time said that for over 30 years, the British Secret Intelligence Service, that's SIS, the forerunner of MI6, ran a worldwide network of news agencies which, at their peak, had some 250 employees and for 15 years acted as sole agents for Reuters in the Middle East. So Reuters news agency was 100% completely infiltrated by British intelligence, and they were spreading. And that's not impartial news. That's not objective news. That's not free press. People have the idea that there's a free press. You know, people. Idiots, frankly, keep talking about there being a free press in the Western world. Of course there's not a free press. It's government controlled, and it's going to give you a very subjective, very biased view of what the government wants, of what the government would like you to see, and they're going to have vested interest, not free or objective at all. And that's in the UK, for example, when it's like the Guardian is privately owned, but and Reuters is supposedly an independent news agency, but it's infiltrated by MI5. So it's not even when it's like the BBC, for example. The BBC is a state-run organisation. You'd think that the BBC would be overrun with British intelligence agencies or agents or operatives, but it's not limited to state-run broadcasters. It includes, as this guy says, it includes the Guardian, it includes Reuters, but even if it's not, the idea that the press is free in the US, where everybody says, well, we have a free press because it's all independent. There's basically hardly any state-run media outlets or news outlets in the US. But those, like Jeff Bezos, owns the Washington Post, right? Do you think that Jeff Bezos, when he paid all that money for the Washington Post, or anybody else who owns any of these other supposedly other independent news outlets, do you think the owners who paid all that money for them don't have a vested interest in them making money at the very least? Of course they do. Mm-hmm. So are they not then going to have an influence on what gets published, what angle is taken, if only in the interest of making the paper more profitable? If they read the newspaper that they've bought, and these are big businessmen, and they see something that they think is not a good angle for the paper to take because it doesn't, let's say, just even from a business perspective, doesn't sell enough newspapers. Do you not think they're going to put some influence on the editors to say, listen, we should maybe take a different approach in this because that way it'll make more money? So therefore the news is automatically slanted, if only from a financial point of view. But obviously those people have political leanings as well. So the idea that it's a free press is complete and utter nonsense, and I'm sick of hearing that idea that has been around for ages, that any of the press, the mainstream media in Western countries, is any freer than in any other country, including totalitarian dictatorships in the middle of Africa or anywhere else in the world. It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's absolutely ridiculous contention.
A key premise of it is that those other countries' press media organizations are not free because they are state-controlled. That's usually... And that, if you're going to shorthand it, they just say, to poo-poo someone else's view, they just say, state-controlled outlet, RT, for example, says this. Ergo, you should have doubt in your mind because of state control. But these guys have spent at least 70 or more, 100 years very cleverly having private entities they control from the shadows.
Right.
So that's worse than the BBC. The BBC, as state control, is answerable to a board of governors. It's answerable to the public. It must be at least somewhat transparent.
Right.
There is public, by being state, has public oversight, and therefore it can't just do whatever the hell it wants. These other organizations,
can do whatever they want.
AP, Reuters, basically write the news for the news organizations. They're literally a printing press for fake intel. Intel to fake news. Yeah. So when Trump's bashing fake news, he's bashing...
But there's so many problems with it across the board. The other problem is the fact that even if it was an independent media organization, a big media organization, when they're talking about politics or what's going on in the world or geopolitics, most of them are entirely dependent on intel agencies for their inside scoop, right? I mean, how many of them report that sources in the CIA said, sources in the Pentagon said, sources in the FBI said? That's individuals in those organizations, intel agencies, telling these media organizations what's actually happening. And you have to assume that those intel agencies and those individuals who are giving them that information do not have an agenda, aren't pushing a load of bullshit. You have to assume that that's the case for you to believe in a free press, objective news. This is what's really happening. It's just mind-numbingly stupid. It's just sorry, I have to move on. Anyway, there's one thing I wanted to say about, you mentioned Putin, the other Trump, Putin. No, not Trump. Not even him. The worst one, even worse than Putin and Trump. Bush. George Bush, W, call piece on the carrier. You're either with us or you're against us. That's really interesting because he comes from, that idea is obviously it's a pernicious, nefarious kind of attitude to take about anything. You're either with us or...
It's totalitarian.
Right.
It must be totally with us or you're a subversive dissident.
Right. He made that popular, apparently, because it wasn't that badly received at the time or since. So apparently that's okay to come up with that strategy or that approach to the world and to America. You're either with us or you're a damn commie and you can get the hell out. But it's interesting because he's a Republican president, but that attitude, and this kind of blows away the whole left-right divide and all that kind of stuff, that attitude, I've seen that attitude coming from people on the left today who have hated on George W. Bush, hated on him for the whole time that he was in office, about being a war criminal and all that kind of stuff. And those same people today are taking exactly the same approach with their own leftist kind of progressive values. that if, for example, immigrants or gay rights, LGBT rights, all that kind of stuff, if you do not automatically agree wholeheartedly with
The whole package.
the whole package, like it's wonderful. Everything LGBT, everything immigrant, everything related to those is wonderful. You can only be positive you can only be a positive advocator for those causes. If you even question, not that you'd be against it, but if you even say, well, maybe this isn't the right approach to take. Maybe there's a bit of a few questions that need to be looked at or considered here in relation to those two topics, for example. You're immediately a Nazi. You're immediately a racist. You're immediately a homophobe. It's absolutely you're with us or against us. If you do not fully support us from the get-go, automatically and instinctively, then there's something wrong with you and we don't like you. I just wanted to say that. But the other thing that brings up that crowd as well is the one thing that sticks out that makes Nazis out of lefties. And I don't mean in any kind of deeper analysis or psychological analysis or historical analysis of the origins of leftism or leftist values or Nazism or fascism or anything. I mean that the one holdout for those people, like we mentioned already, that they're all basically now in the camp of the CIA, the FBI, and the deep state, which is the thing that they've been railing against for the whole of all the history of lefty activism. The one holdout is Israel for those people.
Mm-hmm.
Those lefty types are still very much anti-Israel. And it's kind of weird because they're in the same camp as a guy you mentioned earlier on, David Duke, who's a former KKK member.
Right.
Because he is anti-Israel. He hates the Jews. Maybe these lefties don't hate the Jews, but they certainly don't like Israel at all in any way.
And a lot of Israelis don't distinguish what they're saying. They're saying also you hate Jews. Right. That's all they hear. You hate us.
So it's kind of interesting that's the one kind of domino that hasn't fallen for those people yet, where they've basically swung to basically being part of the right, what was traditionally the right, at least from the left-right divide that historically in the past, in the modern era, and let's say since the 60s or 70s, the kind of right-wing fascists, evil government types were in bed with, or were part of the CIA, intelligence agencies were part of that big government and all that kind of stuff. And those people have now kind of like, slowly, it hasn't happened maybe all at once, but certainly they're slowly moving, because of Trump, they're slowly moving to be in the same camp as the people like that intelligence agency that they previously protested against, but not the Israelis, They're
also still anti-war.
Yes.
But
well,
they're not keeping up with the changing nature of the warfare. So, for example, they'll equally protest U.S. forces bombing Raqqa and Russian forces far more carefully bombing Aleppo to free it from ISIS. War is bad. It's bad under all circumstances. And they're totally missing the actual picture of what's going on there. They'll also bash Trump simply because he's the president of the United States and because there are all these conflicts that are still ongoing, troops in Afghanistan, special forces in Yemen, etc. Well, he's the president, so
do you know
you look at all these people he's killed. Well, now hold on. Has he initiated any wars yet? No, he hasn't. So far, he's an anti-war president, at least by the incredibly low standards created by his predecessors.
Yeah, well, he's the least militaristic president since Jimmy Carter, by the numbers, by far, in the last 40 years. Yeah, Obama blows him out of the water. Obama blows him out of the water, blows Trump out of the water as far as military intervention and killing brown people, killing immigrants, killing potential immigrants. Obama blew the crap out of hundreds of thousands of them. It's ridiculous. No, but the whole thing's bizarre because, like on that Israel thing, like I said, the left, particularly in Europe, I'm talking about Europe. The left in Europe are very much anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian, like vocally, still, and have been. That's a long tradition. But that puts them, if you cross the water, that puts them in the same camp as
never Trumpers.
No, as right-wingers who are anti-Israel, because there's anti-Semitism
right.
right. So KK, like the right-wing nationalists in the US are anti-Jews and therefore anti-Israel. But at the same time, they're also kind of pro-Israel because Israel is against the Muslims. So they're not too sure about that, because there's a historical anti-Semitism of the right, who don't like the Jews. Certain sections of them don't like the Jews, right? But they also don't like Muslims. So which are they going to pick? But then you go back over to England, and you have the right-wing nationalists in England are very much seem to be more pro-Israel because they're anti-Muslim, and Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East protecting us from the Muslim hordes, blah, 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 blah. So, at least in Europe, or at least across the water, it kind of puts the left in the same camp as a certain section of the right, on that topic. So you have to say to a lefty, like, do you realize that you'd have to admit that the right-wing nationalists in the US, some of them actually have some views that you would have to agree with? And then the screaming would start, and brains would melt, and that kind of thing. Smoke would come out of their ears. I'm just putting that out there as an example of how feckless the whole thing is, how confused, and how people really don't know what they're talking about most of the time.
Or what exactly they're protesting.
Yeah, they don't even think about it. They're not able, apparently, to think about it for the most part,
Yeah.
Most of them. So, yeah.
I had another question that was kind of answered by Trump this week. It was a question for me, at least. I think it was pretty clear in your mind, Joe. And that was the issue of NATO. Kind of what's Trump up to there? I mean, we know he went to Brussels and he's proud that he's gotten all the other member states to bump up their contributions. But the seed of doubt, which has been there since he was campaigning, really, when he basically questioned what's the point of having NATO at all, came back up again. When the two presidents left their meetings, they both gave interviews to Fox News. Chris Wallace thought he was doing the proper journalistic thing by being extremely rude to President Putin. That's an okay interview, but Tucker Carlson interviewed President Trump. We have a clip I want to play. It's Carlson's asking him about NATO. I just proceeded by saying that he asked him a question before about NATO, and Trump went off into this usual answer about how, oh yeah, NATO, I did good in Brussels, I got all the members to up their contributions. They'll be sending billions more because, they got to pay. But Carlson wasn't satisfied with it, so he asked him the same question basically again. Let's have a listen to what he said.
Membership in NATO obligates the members to defend any other member that's attacked. So let's say Montenegro, which joined last year, is attacked.
Right.
Why should my son go to Montenegro to defend it from attack? Why is that?
I understand what you're saying. I've asked the same question. Montenegro is a tiny country with very strong people.
Yeah, I'm not against Montenegro or Albania.
No, by the way, they're very strong people. They're very aggressive people. They may get aggressive. And congratulations, you're in World War III. Now, I understand that, but that's the way it was set up. Don't forget, I just got here a little more than a year and a half ago.
Right.
But I took over the conversation 3 or 4 days ago, and I said, you have to pay. You have to pay.
And there he goes again. Back to the key point. You have
Show
to
me
pay.
the
It's
money.
about the money, the trade, and China. And the EU is killing us. But between the lines of what he's saying, it's pretty obvious. He's like, NATO's obsolete. What's the freaking point? It's dangerous. We're going to trigger World War III here. And then I haven't seen the reaction to that, but I imagine CNN's going, oh my God, the president's crazy. What's he saying about Montenegro being strong and all that? He's referring there, but he didn't bloody enunciate it properly. But anyway, what he's obviously saying there is the Balkans twice, for God's sake, were the key arena that caused 2 world wars. Certainly the First World War. There were 2 Balkan wars that led up to it. The assassination of
Franz Duke
Ferdinand.
Archduke Ferdinand.
Yes. And then, boom, World War One. That's obviously what we're referring to. It's a bloody hotspot. What are we doing breaking it up and bringing them into NATO? And his point being,
NATO is a Cold War
He's-
artifact. It's a
does he
Cold
not sound
War.
like a peacenik?
It's a Cold. Well, he does, but it's a Cold War throwback. Obviously, NATO. I mean, it doesn't apply anymore, and he's absolutely right that it doesn't apply anymore. NATO was set up in the context
Trump
of...
doesn't want NATO. Lefties, hello, this is your freaking godsend.
I know.
After all these decades.
Right.
And you're...
No, because he's got an
You're
orange
spitting
face.
on him.
Neil, he's got an orange face. All right, I'm sorry. Forget about World War III and the destruction of the planet and the destruction of me and my children and everything I hold dear. That's not really relevant or important in the face of his face. Right? I mean, he's got a big orange face.
They need to be fish slapped, all of them.
He's got a big orange face. He's unpresidential. He doesn't dance well like Obama. He says stupid things. He said a sexist thing or two. He has this thing about immigrants where he won't just open all the borders and let them all in. Pretty much the same as Obama, but whatever. He's got an orange face, like I said. Did you look at him? Maybe your problem, Neil, is that you haven't been looking enough at Trump. If you would look at him enough, right, just stare at him and get like a close-up picture as much as possible, so you see all the imperfections in his face and stuff, and you'll have a
meditate on it.
Well, you just have a visceral. Eventually, if you stare long enough, you'll vomit. Right? You'll just throw up and you'll go, oh God, I hate that guy. I have to do something to stop him. And that'll be it. And then everything that he wants, you will hate, regardless of what it is. Even if the things that he wants are actually in line with your personal ideology, for example, of anti-war. It doesn't matter. It's the fact that he's Trump and you hate him, and that's all there is to it. Right? Just, you only need... How many brain cells have you got? Probably what is it, like
6
10,
or 7, I think.
No, 10 billion.
Yeah.
Well, there's quite a few billion brain cells.
I'm a billionaire then.
But you get rid of most of them. You need 2, 2 of them just, and the two of them would actually, if you look at them under a microscope, they'd probably be like, they'd look like the shape of Trump's face, basically, Just keep those 2 and have them just connect with each other all the time. Trump's face, Trump's face, Trump's face. He's orange, he's ugly, he's unpresidential, and that's a horrible, that's the treason.
Trump's face.
Right. Betrayed. The fact that he's the president. The president is meant to be cool, suave, sophisticated, better than me, morally and every other way intellectually better than me. The fact that he's not is treason. It's a personal treason.
But George
I feel
W.
betrayed.
Bush was
that was hard enough,
two-footed
but
idiot.
Trump is even worse. At least George W. Bush had a father, had the background, grew up in Kennebunkport, had the silver spoon up his backside growing up, all that, or wherever they put the silver spoons. At least he had that pedigree. Who is Trump? And anyway, apart from that, the media hates him as well. And the media, it's a free press, like we were saying earlier on. The media is totally objective, and we should believe what the media says. And just keep watching all the stuff about that says Trump's evil. And then you'll believe, basically, and you won't give a shit about anything other than the fact that you hate Trump, regardless of what he does. So that's just my advice to you. You'll sleep better at night.
You know what
especially
they're
with 2
doing?
brain
They're
cells.
making me like Trump more and more.
I don't go that route.
And that's getting scary. That's what you're doing. That's the effect you're having. And
There's another video here that I want to play. It's his predecessor, the suave, smooth, nice talking, humanitarian type president called Obama. And I think it's just a short video.
Who?
Barack Hussein.
Never heard.
Mujahideen Muhammad Obama from Kenya. Anyway, I don't know where he's from. He's the president, and it's a short speech he just gave recently. I think he's in South Africa, trying to make peace in South Africa.
And getting millions to say what he has to say.
And he, it's just what he says, for me, kind of summed up in very briefly the kind of difference in worldview or ideology between the people who harken back to Obama and wish that Hillary was president and hate the fact that Trump is president, and they hate everything he stands for. And this is what Obama stands for. Just play the video there and we'll have a listen.
But democracy demands that we're able also to get inside the reality of people who are different than us, so we can understand their point of view. Maybe we can change their minds, but maybe they'll change ours. And you can't do this if you just out of hand disregard what your opponents have to say from the start. And you can't do it if you insist that those who aren't like you, because they're white or because they're male, that somehow there's no way they can understand what I'm feeling, that somehow they lack standing to speak on certain matters. Madiba, he lived this complexity. In prison, he studied Afrikaans so that he could better understand the people who were jailing him. And when he got out of prison, he extended a hand to those who had jailed him because he knew that they had to be a part of the democratic South Africa that he wanted to build.
Blah, blah, blah.
He's referring there to Nelson Mandela.
Some other guy who was also in prison, I think. It's at some... there's stuff going on in South Africa. I don't know. I don't think we'll talk about it this week, but a lot of South African farmers are going to Russia. You know that? They're fleeing South Africa. White Afrikaners, Dutchies, effectively, are going to Russia, and Russia's taking them in, basically. But anyway, that's a different situation. But just on Obama there, he kind of summed up in a few short words, really, just the kind of mindset that seems to be one half of this polemic going on. And it's where he said that you have to get inside the reality or the mind or whatever of people that you disagree with, You have to, it's this melting pot. It's this maybe not a dilution, but definitely a mixing of basically anybody who you disagree with, no matter who they are, anybody who's different, anybody, obviously he's talking there about kind of different cultures, different races, that kind of thing. You got to get inside. Everybody has to be open, like open borders, and let it all in and create something new. Obviously, by definition, you would create something new. You wouldn't be the same. You got to change your perspective. You got to be inclusive, basically, and accepting of diversity, and this is a problem that's obviously going on with the whole immigration issue and why there's pushback against immigration in Europe and to a lesser extent in the US. But it's that ideology, it's that belief that you should fully adopt the views and perspectives, traditions, cultures, everything really of other people, of the other, in order to create peace on earth or to have a wonderful utopian kind of society, and that's what his sentiments are, as he expressed them, are really the sentiments of a lot of people that I know, a lot of my peers and stuff, who have the same approach, And the thing is, it gains a lot of traction. It attracts a lot of people because it's a positive message, right? It's basically anti-conflict, anti-war, anti-social division. It's all the good stuff, But and I suppose I'm just asking, here's a question for you, what's the problem with that? Is there a problem with that?
The only thing that man has in common with Nelson Mandela is that he's black.
Right.
The similarity ends there. And he is using that superficial connection to get in the mind of Nelson Mandela, to channel him. I'm reading a headline here. Obama does Nelson Mandela's Madiba dance in South Africa. So he did some more dancing. You see? I'm in tune with you. I'm
Madiba,
part of
that's
you.
who he mentioned. Madiba. I think he was talking about Mandela, yeah. Right, he was talking about Mandela, yeah.
Look, I've got into the minds of how you think. I'm inside your mind. Now we're all one. That's a psychopath trying to get inside the mind of a normal person.
Right.
That's why they're ferociously trying to figure out, what did Trump and Putin say in private? We need to get inside their head. What did you say? Tell us.
But even at the level of the ordinary person, is it appropriate for someone to in that way fully embrace someone else's difference or diversity?
Well, normal people don't want to.
Right. They want to keep their own.
They're interested.
Stuff.
Oh, you're from where?
Right.
Okay, but then the interest ends there. I'm not going to marry you.
Right. I'm not going to.
We're not going to have a mind meld where we become one.
Right, but that's what they want.
That's
what he's saying.
Psychopathic thing going on here.
Right.
That's the fundamental difference between him and someone like Mandela.
But that's also the fundamental...
The character, the internal...
But that's also a fundamental difference between the left and the right today. If you wanted to sum it up in general, in broad strokes, that's the attitude. It's like people are being... And there's that push to get people to incorporate or assimilate and absorb things that, on the face of it, maybe not such a bad idea. It's okay to adopt new ideas from other cultures, as happened throughout history. But then there's certain other areas of new kind of, let's say, new perspectives, new sexual identities, and even new cultural identities. Let's say you could even extend it to Islam, to radical Islam and stuff. Should we adopt, the kind of restrictive, repressive practices of Islam in the name of diversity and acceptance and inclusivity? And should we accept some of the more, let's say, unorthodox sexual expressions or identities? Should everybody accept those? Should I encourage my children to be accepting and to kind of like get inside the mind of someone who's transgendered, or you know what I mean? I mean, there's no prejudice there against those individuals, but it's just about keeping a healthy kind of a distance between people, and not jump in and not into accepting them wholeheartedly on a humanitarian basis, when human nature is much more complex than that, and people there are clear differences between people and between cultures, and there's nothing wrong with someone respectfully maintaining their own cultural identity while allowing for the existence of someone else's, even in the same country or whatever. But my point is, there's something to be carefully thought about, rather than wholeheartedly and automatically and immediately accepted, as many people on the left try to force people to do, on pain of being accused of being a racist or a sexist or homophobe or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another major blind spot of the left. How in God's name did you go from being generally distrustful of the elites? I mean, after all, you wanted a revolution to overthrow, Anyway, to being generally distrustful of the elites, to parroting everything they say. Do you not see that diversity, inclusivity, all this is coming from the top down?
But people aren't, generally speaking, distrustful of the elites. Most people are only distrustful of a elite, one side of the elite, in this paradigm of left, right, or whatever, and they're not going to stand on their own and combat, be sovereign in a certain sense, or be their own person, and take a stance against a whole corrupt hierarchy and call them all the political class evil, basically, because they'll be left without any leadership in that sense, So you find people who have railed against certain elites and stuff, like people railed against Bush during the Bush years, but that's because they were Democrats, let's say, and they had Hillary in the wings, or whoever at the time, I don't know, Al Gore, whoever was, John Kerry, whoever. They had the opposite side, basically. That was their elite. They still wanted an elite. They just had identified one aspect of the elite, one side of it, as the evil one, like not my team. They still need someone to represent them,
Right.
So that's why most people, you won't find, that's why they won't be able to articulate it. They won't know why they don't like what you're saying. But underneath it, it's the kind of stuff that we would say. It's a place where people can't go. Most people can't go, because you're basically leaving them kind of, they're cast adrift. They're baseless in a certain sense of they have no ground to stand on, because people's position and view of themselves in life, from a psychological perspective in the world, is predicated on a hierarchy, and they're being leaders, and they're being someone to look to, someone who's responsible for them, basically. People just don't want to be responsible for themselves in the big bad world, in an infinite universe. They don't want to stand. They can't think ultimately just me against the world type thing. And that's why someone like Peterson actually is very popular among some people, because that's one thing he actually advocates, is people to learn to take responsibility, to strengthen themselves, so that they can become individuals who can stand and face, if necessary, the entire world, the entire universe alone, if they build enough personal strength and will. And the way you do that is by taking on responsibility for things. You shoulder things that actually builds your quote-unquote muscle, let's say, or your psychological, spiritual, whatever, muscle, to the point where you can stand on your own 2 feet, like I said, against or in the face of everything, if necessary. I mean, it's usually not necessary that one person has to stand on their own, but if you recognize that the system, the the elite, if you want to call it, or the ruling class in this world are fundamentally corrupt, then there's no other option but to basically take that position of none of them represent me really, and they're all going down a path that's probably not good for anybody. So at the very least, I'm not going to hitch my horse to their wagon, basically, because I don't want to go off the cliff with them,
Right. And from their perspective, they see it the other way.
Right.
Trump's leading everyone else off the cliff.
Right.
Trump / Putin / insert populist nationalist dictator. It's pretty polemic. I mean, Obama can still muster millions of tweets. Bloody hell. John Brennan and James Comey last week still got instantly, maybe they're rigged or something, or bots, but they still attract they have a lot of traction,
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people out there. I don't think it's a small number of people, despite what we might like to believe, that they're just a vocal minority. I think there's a lot of people out there who are...
Do you think it splits roughly half and half?
I don't know, maybe. Ultimately, if it comes down to it, maybe ultimately if you did all the numbers, in a general sense, you could maybe split them. But then there's a spectrum, one's near the end, one's further back, and that kind of stuff, more extreme. But generally, maybe you could call it 50-50. But that's a lot of people, yeah. And it's, so it's set up to be a clash of, not a clash of civilizations, really.
Clash of species.
Clash of, interspecies clash, or not interspecies, but a clash of ideologies.
Yeah.
And we'll have to wait and see where it goes. But I think we'll call it a day there on this one. I think we've covered those topics pretty well. So thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you have a good evening wherever you are and whatever you're doing. Till then, see ya.
See you next week or sooner. Bye, everyone.